Hello and welcome to Art Talk once again. And we're so glad that you're able to tune in and spend just a little time with us as we look at the concept of art choices once more. I'm Rona Rutchik, your host today for Art Talk. Mr. Connecticut has long boasted, at first seasonally, and now for quite some years, all year round, an association of artists and their friends. This association has been the center sometimes of exciting Beaux-Arts balls, far more often a schoolhouse of experienced and some less experienced classes of experimental, trial and error. Very often it is the exhibition space of recent work of artists, sometimes from near and very often from a little further away. Works that we, the general public, can come and visit. The Mystic Art Association has weathered quite a lot of storms, not only in the weather, but philosophically as well as financially. And yet, they've been able to boast an 80-year-old birthday. Not at all something to sneeze at. So I thought that you would be interested in meeting some of the principals of the Mystic Art Association, those that are involved now, so that we can hear from them what their past and their present and their future successes are as they see it, some choices that they have made and maybe are making now, whether they're different or similar to the past, and how they see their future, so that you too can know the Mystic Art Association a little better. And if you haven't been there, get yourself down there soon and perhaps even become a member and support the Mystic Art Association. We'd like you to know more about it now, so I'd like you to meet some of our guests. We've been very happy to include on our program today in the studio the director of the Mystic Art Association, Anne Newmam. Anne, thanks so much for coming and for bringing along with you consultants to the Mystic Art Association, who we'll talk to in a few minutes, both Pat Leibig and Paul White. But you tell me now, if you can, what is the Mystic Art Association about these days?
Well, first of all, good morning, Rona, and thank you very much for having us on your program. The Mystic Art Association has, as you mentioned, been in existence now for about 82 years. Central to our mission is the establishment of the association as a cultural center in Mystic and the greater Mystic area. In so doing, we approach the educational community, the music community, and of course our primary focus, the visual arts. We have about 130 artist members who support us in this mission, and probably 150 volunteers who work with us on a weekly basis, and a membership of about 690.
Wow. So you have, as you say, artist members and some non-artist members.
Yes, very definitely.
Has it always been like this?
Yes, it has. As a matter of fact, when it was founded back in 1913 by Charles Davis, his partners in crime were not really from the artist community. Dr. Leonard was one of the main financial backers of the original association.
So from the very beginning, you've had the notion that both artists and non-artists might be interested in the same thing.
Yes, very definitely.
And as well as hanging artworks, you say you have some other things that you do to so-called nourish this community.
Yes, we've recently established an outreach program within the greater Groton area through the collaboration with the Groton Parks and Recreation Department. We will be offering summer classes this year to reach the children who normally can't attend our classes because we run them on an early morning basis. Many children have parents who work, and so we thought it might be a good idea to bring our services to where the children are.
Oh.
And Groton serves throughout its 5 to 7 schools hundreds of children who will be eligible to take our classes over a 6-week period this summer. In addition to that, that's the new focus of our outreach to children. But in addition to that, we run regularly scheduled oil, pastel, and watercolor classes in the gallery, evenings and mornings.
In a few moments, we're going to take a look at the interior of the gallery from a visit we did earlier. Pat, you've been an architect, a distinguished architect in this area for so long. You've had a handle in seeing that the building itself looks the way it does?
Yes, I've been involved with the association since 1942. And recently we went from a seasonal operation to a year-round operation. And this involved extensive changes to the building that was originally constructed in 1932. It's now open on a year-round basis, and of course it meant rebuilding and revising completely the mechanical systems and upgrading the thermal protection and all the things you need to do to operate economically on a year-round basis.
Well, speaking about economically, and we'll talk way later about the finances of running an association, but the spot that the Mystic Art Association sits on, I should think economically is a very valuable piece of property.
When I think back of the people involved on the board in 1931 that made the decision at the beginning of the worst depression we've ever had, to go out and buy that piece of property and to erect the building they did, they certainly had confidence, if not much sense. But they succeeded, and it's been close at times, but we're now on a sound basis financially.
We're going to take a look at the beautiful Mystic Art Association right on the banks of the Mystic River now. We took a visit over there, and you'll be delighted to see what we have to show you. Let's take a look now at the galleries, space, and building of the Mystic Art Association. I know you'll agree with me that that space is absolutely beautiful. And along with the wonderful architectural eye of Pat Leibig, we have the artistic sensibility of Paul White to talk to and try to remember some of the real shots in the arm that the Mystic Art Association has been gotten from various artists. Along with that wonderful regional show, there were some suggestions of the past that we were able to capture. What were some of them?
Well, one of the things that stand out in my mind is the wrought iron railings that are installed there. And there were wrought iron chandeliers at one time, which aren't there now, but Lester Baranda, one of the early founders of the gallery, designed those. He was famous, a New York person who was famous for his forge in New York and his design in wrought iron. Those things are still very much there.
Now that Baranda name sounds even familiar to me. Bonnie Baranda?
Bonnie Baranda's father.
Ah.
And Bonnie lives on Mason's Island and
is a sculptor.
Is a sculptress. Fine. And we have in our permanent collection several pieces of Bonnie's.
And as I recall, looking through some of your Mystic Art Association books, there's a wonderful picture that the New Yorker magazine used as a cover that includes a Bonnie Baranda, and perhaps you're in it as well, a few different artists from the earlier years hanging a show at the Mystic Art Association.
Yes, that was a cover that one of our members made for he was an illustrator in New York for magazines, and he did many New Yorker covers. And he did one of the gallery during when he was showing there, and we're very proud of that cover. And
what about the stone lady, the nude figure? Has a plaque to it as well. What's the story about Bates?
Kenneth and Gladys Bates were very prominent early members of the gallery, and during the 30s. And she was a sculptress and had many pieces in galleries in New York, in their collections in New York. And she's living in Mystic, and sometimes we get her and bring her over to the gallery, and she's very interested in everything we do there. And her pieces are, there's not too many of the larger pieces around, but Stone Ledge Gallery has one, a reclining lady, and then we have that one, and which is a beautiful piece of work. And we have another treasure out in a hallway, which the camera did pan, is Fran Brackman gave us a painting that her husband did of her in that red dress.
This is the Robert Brackman.
Robert Brackman's
long portrait of his wife.
Yes.
And his work is still actively at auction. I see moving around from place to place, and there are collectors still, and I would assume you have in your archives some Brackman.
We do have some, and we would like to have more. And he was very prolific, and there is a lot of Brackman work, but it's all highly prized and very seldom goes on the market.
I see. So when one does find a Brackman, it is
It's
something to grab.
Yeah.
I see. Now, you too came from the big city of New York as a successful artist involved in the galleries there. How come you found Mystic to be an important place for your work?
Well, actually, I just discovered Mystic by accident. I was coming up from New York on the way to Newport, and I wanted to get over by when I came across the bridge, I decided I wanted to go over by the water. And this is kind of a little joke, but I saw the sign that said Nonk. And so I drove over to Nonk to get by the water. I toured all around Nonk, and before I left, a native told me it was Noank. But I thought, and so I drove up into Mystic and discovered the art gallery.
And now you live, I understand, in one of the houses that was an artist who preceded you.
Early founders, and there's a brass plaque in our entranceway that has 5 names on, and she was one, Armelda Dudley.
I see.
And I live in her house.
And one of the things that you brought with you, perhaps as an idea, perhaps you saw it in New York, but I remember stories that were to give you the credit for the Beaux-Arts balls. Were you the adrenaline shot into that group?
No, for years and years and years they had Beaux-Arts ball, and they were very famous.
Even before you were there?
Oh, yes. The early ones. And they were fantastic. And Jim Allen was a man everybody knew in the area. And I guess he was the star, more or less, because he would come to all the Beaux-Arts ball as primarily an Indian brave with only a loincloth, and he had a superb body, and he liked to show it off. And so he was more or less the star of the ball.
I can understand why. In this day and age, that sort of thing sells too, they say. Yeah. We're going to just stop for a minute or two for a public service announcement and then come back to visit with our guests and listen to some wonderful stories about the Mystic Art Association. We'll be right back.
Art is a process that fills our lives. See it, enjoy it. This public service announcement is brought to you by the Griffis Art Center, New London, Connecticut.
Here we are again at Art Talk, and I'm Rona Rutchik, your host, and I'm talking with the Mystic Art Association principals, Joanne Newman, the director, and Pat Leibig and Paul Lowell White, both artists and both benefactors and both very important to the day-to-day happenings as volunteer special people for the Mystic Art Association because they love it. And we're talking right now with Paul about the wonderful Beaux-Arts. I wish I had been to one, but I hadn't. But I understand that maybe the stories were so spectacular that you might do it again someday.
Well, I did later on in the 80s. They asked me to put on one, and so I started to work on it and had no idea it was such a task, and it spent about 3 months preparing for it. It was a big success, and so then on top of that we put on 2 others in succession after that. But then we didn't have any more, and we haven't had any since the 80s, and so it certainly is time to do it again. And the membership at large wants us to do that.
I see. Pat, were you there? Did you?
I was involved with many of them from about, well, even during the war years when I was home on leave we had one, but principally from 1945 until about 1970. It was the principal means of income for the gallery. We used to raise approximately $1,000 to $1,200, which was a lot of money for us at that time.
Who came?
And Well, mainly people in the community, but they came from New London, Westerly, Norwich. We had strong support for it. And
did everyone dress up?
Oh, completely costumed. And there was a spirit of competition, and we were besieged to give the title of the ball so that people could plan their costumes beginning in late spring and for the ball that took place right after Labor Day.
Do you remember anything that you wore?
I'm
Do you
sorry?
remember what kind of costume you wore?
Well, they had themes so that you dressed accordingly. I remember one time going as an owl,
An owl.
another time going as Thoth Lunas, an Egyptian minor deity, that sort of thing.
But people went all out to kind of...
Oh yes, they got involved completely in it. We were helped in this respect by Blunt White, who was president of Sunoco Paper Tube Company at that, which was active in Mystic at that time, and he'd send a roll of paper which was approximately 4 feet wide and about 4 feet in diameter, weighed 1,000 pounds maybe, and we'd unroll that on the gallery floor, cut it off in lengths to reach from the ceiling to the floor, and then staple it to the walls. And then on that, whoever was the artist appointed for the theme of the ball would have prepared sketches, and we'd make lantern slides and project them on the wall and do the entire painting in a period of maybe 3 days or so, just before the ball took place. And the gallery was completely transformed because it was painted from floor to ceiling and all 4 walls.
About how many people attended?
Well, we were limited because simply because of the size of the building, and we never would admit any more than 250
Oh,
people.
but that's a lot of people. And in this day and age, we're in the region that the Mystic Art Association lives, any event that could boast 250 people who are looking forward to coming and preparing beforehand is immediately a success. And I'm sure those numbers, if they would be upgraded to the finances of today, an amount of money of $1,200 for an event probably was quite spectacular.
Well, we have to plan our events a little bit more carefully because almost everybody has a car these days. We have to worry about parking. We have to worry about
where they're going to be,
accommodating the fire code and the other things involved. So we're pretty much limited to 250.
Well, speaking about planning, we're going to stop now to take a look at another piece of video that we took on our visit to Mystic with our cameras and see some of the other behind-the-scene planning things that go on. And we'll talk more about who is involved in the planning and what it's for when we come back. Let's take a look again at the Mystic Art Association on site and see just what kind of business is being done down there.
Good morning, Sharon. Thank you for this opportunity to introduce you to some of the key players behind the scenes here at the Mystic Art Association. I'll start down here to my right with Willis Schuster, who is the chairperson of our Public Relations Committee, Pat Leibig, who has been a member of this organization for about 50 years now and is a key and instrumental part of the backbone of this organization, from architecture to our computer system. Pam Gordonier, one of our artist members, who is co-chairperson of the wet paint auction, which we'll be holding next month, and which is the purpose of this meeting. Lois Constantine, the chairperson of our historical committee, was also one of our illustrious artist members, was the monitor for Robert Brackman, as a matter of fact, and heads up both our permanent collection and our archives. And Sandy Simpson, who is newly arrived here from Australia, who is heading up our volunteer program. The purpose of the meeting this morning is to discuss where we've come with obtaining artists and goods and services from the community for our wet paint auction, And I think, Pam, I'll turn this over to you and give you the opportunity to tell us where we are and what our new tasks are.
Well, I was busily writing a press release, not press release, because that's Willow's job, but something for the newsletter to give people an idea of really what it's all about. And because it's the first time we've ever done anything like this, and I realized that, you know, there's some things that people have to have a vision. So what I want to do is read to you what I have, and it starts out by saying, ready, set, go. Rain or shine, get those brushes and checkbooks ready to be used for our unique fundraiser, the wet paint auction on July 22nd. And then I went down and broke up the day. I don't know if it's best to just have this Xeroxed and give it to everybody, or whether I should read through it, so it's up to you folks.
Well, probably if we had copies of it, then we'd all have a chance to formulate some thoughts and go over it.
And so then the next stage is to make sure that all the gifts and services are all taken care of. So do you have any thoughts on that, Cindy?
I just need to get the... You've just seen a meeting in progress in our conference room, and we'd now like to show you some of the behind-the-scenes work that goes on here. This is our archives room, and we double our archives all around here with our permanent collection storage. We have in here records on our former artist members from our founding in 1913 to the present active artist members. We keep our permanent collection here and back in here at the present. And over here are records of our minutes of meetings from 1913, catalogs from as far back as we can get. We're still pleading with people to give us catalogs of old exhibitions. We work in here every Thursday afternoon on the archives. We have 5 dedicated people. We have an archivist, Gloria Gabbert. We're very fortunate to have. She's worked wonders with us. I'll turn it over to you, Pat.
Well, I think the archival committee has done a remarkable job given the constraints, physical constraints they've had. This room is only about 12 feet square, and they have filled it already, and we need additional space. The board recognizes this, and at our last meeting they have authorized the addition of another L on the north end of the building, and we will relocate the archival and permanent collection group there, and that will allow expansion for some time into the future. This space will be converted to additional art education storage. The history of the permanent collection up until about 2 years ago or 3 years ago was sort of haphazard. People felt that we should be making a collection of early artists' work, but it was never organized, and it now is being very well organized. In addition to that, minutes, records of the organization have been put in order, and although there are some gaps, we have a much better picture of what the history of the organization is over the past 65, 70 years. We hope to get this addition built. We have 2 approvals, the local historic district and the town public works and planning division, but we hope to get the work under construction by September and get the new addition completed at some point early in 1996.
You know, so often when you talk about archives, it sounds like such a dusty word. And you think that a museum art association, as the Mystic Art Association is, would kind of like just have this, you know, basement or back room somewhere where this stuff is just going to collect a lot of dust, but not so in the Mystic Art Association. Pat, even in the conference room earlier, when we showed the meeting going on, there were a whole lot of paintings that surrounded the decor of that room. Those were of the earlier artists?
Yes, there are early artist members that we've managed to collect over the years. Archives and the permanent collection are really two separate functions. Archives is headed up by Gloria Gavert, who is a trained archivist, and she has been putting some semblance of order into the barrel of collected memorabilia we had, and we have gaps that she's now soliciting people to close. We have put it in some semblance of order. We're putting it on computer. As far as the permanent collection is concerned, that's headed by, and the historical aspect of it is headed by Lois Constantine. Mm-hmm. And she's been very good at rounding out our collection. We have something like 100 plus odd objects that we have acquired, most of them in the last 10 years. Mm-hmm. And it's largely due to her efforts that we've achieved this.
Well, Joanne, what does the everyday present membership get out of your organization having a rich archival and historic collection?
Well, 15 years ago, people would call up and ask something about Nat Little or Carl Lawless or some of the other early members. And they'd get, gee, I don't know, but I'll ask one of the older members. Mm-hmm. And it was pretty much hearsay, oral history, so to speak. It was not organized. Lois and Gloria have interviewed our older members for their record and their input as to what happened years ago, and we have that on tape now. Many of these have been transcribed so that they'll be easy to access on our computer.
Joanne, how do the members use this? If they have something in their collection, or if they know of someone who does, do they talk to you about it?
Yes, they do. They approach us in a variety of ways. Just this past week, we've had two occurrences. One of our artists, Rachel Armstrong, who's featured in the regional, brought to us a Walt Killam picture, which is a new addition to the permanent collection. She knew that we would be very happy to receive that. And we had a letter from a gentleman in Florida who sent along about a dozen photos of a Brackman still life, inquiring as to whether we would like to purchase that Brackman. As a result, we've gone out to our membership to see if there might be someone or some group of people among our members who would be interested in purchasing that Brackman for our permanent collection. The entire history of the Mystic Art Association is tied up, of course, in our archives and in our permanent collection. Lois has done such an amazing job of bringing that collection together that she's received some recognition from UConn and Hildy Cummings, who's heading up the CONAP project. Yeah. If that project goes, we will be online with our contribution of the old Mystic Art Colony, and largely due to the visuals that we'll be able to share via our permanent collection.
What strikes me about your work, though, is that you just called it the Mystic Regional Art Colony. From the looks of the regional show that you have hanging, that we took pictures of, where artists come from Colchester, New London, New Haven, Norwich, Mystic. There is work there hanging from artists from other colonies, if we were to break it all down, and to listen to the gentleman talk about the Beaux-Arts balls and all those people who would come, It now seems very important that your regional sensibility is wide. Certainly the Norwich art scene was represented with Joe Gualtieri and Alexei von Schlippe, and Dennis Driscoll is on your walls. There are Jack Fix, who was a Norwich artist, who is now a Stonington artist, is involved in your association. Chris Zong is in New London and is hanging on your walls as part of the Griffis Art Association as he first came here, and now as part of the Mystic Art Association regional show. I think that's a very important idea, and it's quite different, isn't it, than some of the other associations?
Yes, I think you're right about that. I think that there are a group of core artists who have achieved some degree of fame in the greater region, and just by the very nature of how fast the world is moving, it is necessary, or they feel it necessary, for them to be represented by various associations.
The volunteers that we saw in some of the footage a few minutes ago, Paul, come from different places as well. And some were artists sitting there and some not. This seems to be a very important aspect of the Mystic Art Association.
Well, all organizations depend on their volunteers, and we certainly do. We couldn't exist without we have several hundred volunteers out of the organization who are very active. Joanne is constantly on the telephone getting them come in to do envelope stuffing, whatever it might be that the project that she has, with all of the shows that we put on, which about 10 a year now. The receiving committees, they're all volunteers. I guess we have 3 paid employees. All the rest of the activities are volunteers.
And with volunteers gets connection and beloved feelings, and eventually the funds, wouldn't you say, to keep such an association nourished?
Well, those volunteer people are from the people who give to the gallery. Their families give.
I see.
And we depend a lot on that. We've just been through a fundraising, and many of those volunteer families have been the main supporters for our for our fundraising program. So not only are they active, they're working, but they're also active financially helping out.
Right, both
which
ends.
we have to have.
Yes, it's very important in order for the
yeah.
bills to be paid and the association to be running and the gallery to be open. We thank you, Mystic Art Association, for inviting the Griffis Art Center and the Art Talk to come in and photograph your galleries and to come to the studio to talk with us. And we're very proud of what you do in our area, and we invite all of our listeners to come and visit the Mystic Art Association and to take a look and see what they do, and perhaps become an interested volunteer and look at the exhibits at their walls, and perhaps attend one of the wonderful events that they have planned, both for artists and non-artists. And we hope you'll tune in again another time to Art Talk. This is Rona Rutchik, your host today. Thank you for watching.